is Tracy, and his dad's name is Darren. Mason was the youngest of 6 children, and his older siblings, really took him under their wing. They played with him, they took care of him, they spent time with him. As the youngest of 4, I can only imagine what it's like to have 6 siblings. I have enough trouble with the 3 that I have. When he was young, it was quickly learned that Mason had a speech impediment. Specifically, he was diagnosed with speech aphasia. And I know what you're thinking. What does that mean? Aphasia is typically a symptom of something else. However, we don't really have any more details about any other condition that Mason may have had. So I'm just going to presume that it's something he was born with. Now, someone with aphasia may speak in also very quiet and reserved. He didn't have any close friends yet. But Tracy went through his phone anyway and texted every one of his contacts to see if they had seen him, and no one had. Later that evening, after they had exhausted all of their other efforts, they went to the police and reported Macin missing. Police did take the Smiths seriously. They believed Macin had run away. He'd been in trouble the night before, and they thought that he was just upset. Unfortunately, this was not the first time that Macin had run away. 2 years prior, while still living in Canada, he had run away. The night that he had run away had been bitterly cold, and he came home on his own after just a couple of hours. So law enforcement on duty in St. George that night kept their eyes open for Macin throughout their shift, but no one noticed anything. The next day, September 2nd, Tracy decides she's going to go through Macin's room more thoroughly, which is probably what I would have done all freaking night. She ended up finding the school books that he should have taken to school with him that day, hiding under a pile of clothes in his room, as if he was trying to hide them or keep someone from finding them. She also found his wallet with his money and his ID, and this kind of set off a new level of panic, because if he did run away, why didn't he take his wallet with his money and his ID? So, on this day, some people came forward. They said that they saw someone who matched Macin's description standing at a gas station near an on-ramp to Highway 15. Macin is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6'4" teenager at this time. He has a distinct look, and that's really tall. Highway 15 is the highway that ran from St. George to Vegas. This boy was apparently holding a sign that indicated he was trying to get to Vegas. But when the police go there to investigate, they don't find this boy. They request surveillance footage from the station, but it wasn't a quick process. Meanwhile, they also get a separate tip from someone who thought they saw Macin in Las Vegas. Darren didn't wait for the surveillance footage. He immediately gets in his truck and makes the drive to Las Vegas. But he finds no sign of his son. The next day, investigators receive the CCTV footage from the gas station and confirm that the young man that people had seen was not Macin Smith. Searches were taking place all over St. George as the people in the community learned about his disappearance. St. George is apparently a beautiful area of Utah near the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area, and in particular just down the street from Macin's house, a very rocky area with high drop-off cliffs. The main consensus in everyone's opinion was that Macin had simply run away. They weren't really thinking of foul play at the time. About a week after Macin is last seen, Tracy decides to go through his wallet one more time, and she finds this folded up note, and apparently it was 3 pages long, and it made Tracy's heart stop. Now, this note has not been made public, but we do know that he mentioned self-harm and specifically said, "I am done." The search for Macin described as quite tall, blonde, and he had a speech impediment. He asked the girls if they had any spare change so he could get on the bus. The girls said that he was very nice and polite, and they had given him change. When they told their mother about the encounter, the mom said that he sounded just like Macin Smith, a young boy that she had heard about missing from St. George. She showed them a photo, and they believed that this boy could have been Macin. They called the authorities and immediately tried to request surveillance from the Panda Express, but the system had not been working at the time. Tracy was able to play a voicemail recording for these two girls who agreed that this had been Macin. However, police said that they later ruled out the possibility that this was Macin, which I don't understand. How do they know this? Some sightings came in from California, and Tracy felt like this was a possibility because Macin had talked about living in California. As people began to wonder if Macin ran away or had intentions to harm himself, they start to question, and I hate that they start to question his parents. While they did seem sincere, especially Tracy, who was very visibly devastated, Darren really kind of stayed out of the public eye. Now, Tracy is a Mormon and part of the Mormon community, but Darren was not. So she had this circle of people surrounding her and trying to help her, but he kind of was a bit standoffish about all of that. And I get that. Having been raised a Jehovah's Witness, they rally, but they make me uncomfortable. So the police, after further research, learned something that didn't quite fit with the timeline. They did confirm that Darren went to the gym on the morning of September 1st. However, his card shows that he swiped in at 7:45. But if you remember, Macin left home at 7:40. Darren said he hadn't seen him because he was back in bed. So, did he teleport to the gym? How did he make it there so quickly? So investigators put a tracking device in Darren's truck for 60 days without him knowing. After the fact, he did find out, and he said he didn't care. He had nothing to hide. And if it helped remove suspicion and get investigators back out there looking, track me, he says. maybe Mason was just so mad that he decided, forget it, I'm just out. I'm just not gonna do this anymore. And he hid his school books and he left his wallet. Or maybe he didn't even, maybe he couldn't even find his wallet. Sean can't find his half the time. He leaves the house without it and it drives me crazy. So maybe Mason just couldn't find his wallet. I don't know exactly where it was in his room. If it was out and visible, or, maybe he just wasn't thinking about the fact that he would need money. He's like, I just have to get out of here. And maybe he came upon, not necessarily foul play of someone hurting him, but maybe he fell down one of those cliffs and broke his ankle or his knee or his fib, I don't know, and couldn't get back to his family. Which that thought always makes me so sad. The thought of someone being injured in nature and not being able to get any help and being alone when something happens or when they pass is just absolutely terrifying for me. Do I believe he could have gone out and harmed himself? Absolutely. I think that, we all have a smidge of that capability within ourselves. And maybe he wrote that letter and stuck it in his wallet to remind himself what he didn't want to do. Or maybe he wrote it in there so that his mom would know what had happened. However, again, he didn't have any weapons that anyone knew of. He didn't have access to anything that he could ingest that would harm him. He didn't take any money, so he didn't go to the store to purchase something that could have harmed him. Now, the trafficking thing, I do think that that is also possible. I spent a lot of time on the internet in high school, in chat rooms, and talking to people I probably should not have been talking to. But y'all know we have heard so many stories and cases of people who meet someone online and they think they're in love, and they, even just friends. I mean, Sean's best friend is a kid that lives in Georgia. We play Pathfinder